Lauriston Harden from NTI ITS, and he's assisted by Ian Wong from Beyond V Solutions on building trust. So take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy. There's no assistant. I mean, we're both doing this together. You know,
No, I'm the assistant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I'm going to look to him. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. The first warning message is the same one I gave at the earlier panel. If you don't talk, I will call on you. And since I know most of you, I know you by name and I can call you. So be involved. The second thing, Andreas, this is a bow to Bowel last week. That this panel, you started with a philosophical panel. We're ending with a philosophical panel. So there you go in the process. So what we've been working on over the last several days is talking about fundamentally consistent, repeatable testing across a bunch of different labs. To some extent, I'm not sure that we talked about why. We just said, this is something we need, and everybody nodded their head, and let's go get into the technical details of what that is. That's what this panel is about, and what the breakouts are about to some extent is, what's the story behind the need for consistent, repeatable testing? And that's trust. Now, I actually had the thought of having everybody get up and doing the fall and, you know, you catch the person and all that sort of stuff. But that probably doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's it. We'll do that in the bar later. So I was thinking about trust and I started looking up different things. And one of the things that struck me was trust, you know, is the willingness to risk. And actually in Berlin last week, I was talking to Katya a little while about this. And that was what really came up was, what we're trying to do is we're trying to overcome people's inertia to risk. That we can come up and we can do this, a bunch of testing, and we can present really good products, but we have to come up with a way to overcome that innate risk that's built into everybody. That the analogy, you know, the old phrase now that I always use is, nobody gets fired from buying from IBM, okay? So if I'm a present carrier and I have equipment from one of the large OEMs, and I say, okay, I'm gonna buy my next round, my next release cycle from one of those OEMs, everybody's gonna nod their head and they get to keep their job. But what we need to do is talk about this, and Ganesh and I talked about this yesterday. What we need to do is really discuss those avenues of trust or risk, and then especially in the breakout sessions, talk about, okay, how do we come up with confidence measures? How do we come up with ways to develop further confidence in what we're doing? So the first thing I'm gonna throw out a question for everybody in the process is, when you think about overcoming, if we want to call it building trust or overcoming risk, what does that mean to you as far as either as an operator, as a vendor, as a test lab? What are you trying to do? What's the biggest barrier you've got that you think you have as far as risk that's getting in the way? Because in one of my roles with the Innovation Fund, our goals fundamentally is to knock down barriers to open RAN adoption. So risk, it may be that final barrier in the process because it's perception versus reality. So what have you encountered? How do you see that issue of risk or trust getting in your way? Once again, if somebody doesn't talk, I get to call on you. So give it some thought, and you can always start.
No. It should come from the audience. I think that's a great way to kind of pose the question. Maybe we should start with an operator.
Okay. Well, I think there's somebody from DT in the room. I noticed that. I thought he was going to walk out for a minute.
I'm wearing the operator hat now, right?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know why. So for the operator, from the operator perspective, I think, can I say it's simple, but so they run a network that serves hundreds of millions of customers. So, and if they introduce new technology, they must be 100% safe and sure that nothing gets broken, that they can, in case that something goes wrong, that they can roll it back so that the service is guaranteed. So the second part is, and that has also a little bit to do with risk, there is an established system between the operators and the big vendors. So, and this is somehow how they share the risk. So I would not say that the operators move all the risk to the big vendors. That's not true. There is a model how they share the risk in this established system. And so far, I think with Open RAN, we're still learning how that could look like in future. So that's, don't know whether this answers
Well, that's
your
good.
question.
That's a good point, because risk goes beyond technology by far. And one of the barriers is the concept that if it breaks, do you have the wherewithal to come in and fix it? Do you have the wherewithal to make me whole during the process of fixing it? Because I'll speak for the US market. There are no new customers, okay? Everybody has at least one cell phone, if not two. So so customer experience becomes everything in the process, especially, AT&T led that thought a number of years ago. So when they're looking, if I'm an operator, when I'm looking to put in new technology, especially from a new vendor, I want to make sure that if it breaks, you are a big enough company that you can handle fixing all of it for me, because I'm going to lose customers and that's going to look bad. So I'm going to come back to you. So Andreas, that's a very interesting question on the trust that has only a peripheral side to do with technology.
Yeah, okay, I'll add a couple of views here. So I guess the first question is, how do you even model a trust or risk, right? So if you go to the academic point of view, there was a paper by Nobel-winning professor. He says, on the side of risk, there are usually three categories, right? That you are a risk-seeking individual, or a risk-neutral individual, or a risk-averse individual. What does that mean? It means, for example, if you're betting money on a gamble, then you might be a person who is more interested in earning the profit rather than losing the dollar. But there are many people who are more concerned about losing the dollar than making the amount of money, right? So depending upon who the individual is, in this case it would be operator, vendor, it's a whole different story, right? So that's the first thing. How do you model risk in this setup? The second thing is, I see, so there is an ideal world where you have open reference design for everything, like Tracy mentioned, open source software, centrally managed or whatever. But then there is the real world where everybody wants a competitive edge on their competitors, right? So if we go with, let's say, close to the ideal world, then the US vendor is never gonna beat Taiwanese vendor, right? So right, why would I do business with 100 times the cost, because of the economy, because of the everything around that. So there has to be some kind of NAS equilibrium, if you think about the game theory, where everybody has a selfish motive, but they still come towards a working solution, which is kind of works for everybody. It's called NAS equilibrium in that term. So we need to think about those. How do you model risk? How do you model trust? And how do we come up with that NAS equilibrium that works for everybody, given all the selfish goal of every individual in this ecosystem?
That's an interesting point. The interesting point really is we're facing, if we look at it as a telecom industry, we're facing trying to make a rather momentous change to a large industry that has been operating this way for quite some period of time, and in many cases quite comfortably. Now, the reasonable argument can be made if we assume for a moment that 6G is coming at some point. 6G is going to look like a very localized technology. It's going to look like a much more open architecture in that regard, just to support the things that it's talking about. So it's coming. You know, whether operators care to accept that those models are changing, the model of how the roadmap is developed and maintained, all those things are changing in the process. But that's going to happen over time. And for ORAN, we need it to happen sooner. We need for, once again, Innovation Fund, we look at it, we want a diversified supply chain. And that requires smaller companies that can come in, or larger companies, I don't care if they come from an adjacent market, come in and perform in this market reasonably soon before we get to 6G in the process. So then the question comes, the question you brought up, I'll take the vendor community, for instance, in this case. How do the vendors come together to create that momentum that gets somebody to be a first mover? What is it that we have that will get, and I don't care, I care, but I don't have a preference whether it's DT or whether it's Docomo, whether it's AT&T. I don't have a preference. What I have a preference is that I think we as an industry have to say we need somebody to point to say, yes, they put out an RFP, they responded, they are using Open RAN equipment with specific ORAN interfaces, and they've been willing to take the risk. So I'd be interested to hear from the vendor side, is there something there that we can point to, and I'm going to discount and say, and it's not the RIC at first. It's down the road, it's the RIC, but today, maybe an RF environment, maybe the non-real-time RIC, but the real-time RIC, I don't think that's it for the first. I'm going to say my opinion. Once again, I'll discount that. That's not the government opinion. This is my opinion. That's not it at the point. So I'm interested to hear if any vendors have any ideas of what is that thing? What is that thing that will push somebody over the edge to take the risk? Nobody has an idea.
Ganesh? That's my job.
Well done. He shouldn't have sat up front.
Yeah. So with all the elements of risk and the risk averse behavior, which we talked about for various good reasons on the telco side, the major telcos, I think we see the appetite to try out something new or innovative with smaller players and or even with the larger players for some of these select use cases. It could be regions where they want to enhance or improve the coverage, maybe a fixed wireless access kind of solution. In some cases, we've got into shared network solution. So these are areas where the risk is, when they are willing to take the risk to see the benefits of a newer and more innovative solution. And it takes, I would say, a very long journey of convincing the operator folks and working with an ecosystem to put together the right set of partners, ecosystem partners, to make the journey. And I would say from our experience, this has been a more practical and more successful approach to try this way.
Okay.
I don't want to be answer as a vendor. So it seems that is the round for the vendors. But there's another, related to the trust, I think there's another aspect. Oh, there's another aspect, and that is the established responsibilities and roles. So, and we are currently in the phase, that's also triggered by a lot of cloudification and this new software trends. So we are currently in the phase to figure out how, okay, I can speak for DT, how we can use these new opportunities. And that comes also with new responsibilities. And if you talk about trust, then again, it's not only the responsibility, then you need to have the capabilities. So if you want to be a software telco, then you need a lot of software developers and software related processes, etc. So and that doesn't come for free and from day one. So it's a learning. I don't know whether you followed the discussion in Germany about replacing, or let's say about these global economy challenges. And that there's a discussion whether DT will develop an own SMO. So which is a big challenge for companies like DT. And no guarantee, honestly, no guarantee that it will come right on time. So no, there's a streaming, should be careful, but that is also a risk and risk taking. So it brings us back to that. Yeah.
Since I'm here representing the DoD, I thought I would share kind of an Army doctrine principle around trust, right? Because most people have a general idea about what trust is and isn't, right? But in the Army, the concept, there's a doctrine that states trust is shared confidence amongst commanders, subordinates, and partners in that all can be relied on and all are competent in performing their assigned tasks. Embedded in this is the belief that that this is a lived principle and demonstrated on a regular basis, right? So I don't know if I think about our community attracting people to it. We have to be seen as trusted because we are all working together as an integrated network and system. There's a lot of interactions there. So I thought I'd put that broad concept out.
That's a good point. And that's an interesting way to look at, depending on what part of the value chain you're in or what part of the equipment chain you're in, what is it, are we demonstrating that first off, we actually work together and we trust each other's equipment to work as we expect it to in the process? So when you look at trust, then you've got to look at it, multiple lenses. And we certainly are asking operators, trust us, buy our equipment, it'll work great, okay? And it does. But then we have to say, okay, I've got my ORU here and I trust that it will work with this ODU, and that when they push a new software release, we've already had it and we've already looked at it and we've already done our regression testing and everybody's happy. So that's an interesting, I guess that's a question from me, from my side of it is, does that happen enough yet? Do people that maybe you've integrated with in a Plug Fest or maybe in the 5G Challenge or something else, that was a point in time. Does that continue? Now that you've built that relationship, that you've integrated across the open front hall with one vendor, when they have updates, do you check that again? Is that, because that's another element of this trust in the market, I think. So it'd be interesting to know how that happens. You shouldn't have sat up front.
Thank you, Ganesh.
So one benefit, direct benefit, which we see participating regularly in the PlugFest kind of events and even 5G Challenge, we have built these relationships beyond those events into a business relationship where we cross-reference each other. We can take the integrated solution as an example to multiple customers. So this has generally worked well for Redis, and primarily we are a CUDU software provider, and so multiple chipsets, multiple platforms, cloud hyperscalers, and even orchestrator products, and of course many RU vendors and RIC vendors and so on. So this is a workable model is what I wanted to say based on our example of how we've been participating since the early days of PlugFest. The first ORAN PlugFest happened in Beijing, China. There was no concept of OTIC at that time. It took a lot of collaboration, travel, and I would say a lot of, I would say, trust among the vendors. And the best example I can quote is what we did in DT Lab. This was together with ONF, the SD-RAN initiative. Believe it, this was during the peak of COVID, and we had 6 different vendors or entities collaborating across the globe. So we had to program manage it in a way that we did integration in pieces, a new radio which was never tested, which was out of the factory, new rig platform, new core network combination, and number of XApps, number of scenarios, and finally getting all tested in DT's Berlin lab. We also took support from one of the vendors here, High Street was here, and then we did integration in 5 different places across the globe, and we all had to help each other. And only in the final days of that event, I had to send an engineer from India to Berlin. But otherwise, most of these things were achieved in parts, in different parts of the globe. And finally, we were able to pull off a demo in an open courtyard, a mobility scenario being controlled by a rig and set of XFs. That's the best example I could give.
That's a wonderful example in the process. And I think that's a story we need to tell more often, quite frankly.
So we have talked a lot about business case. So imagine that you have a group of engineers and they are set and assigned to work on certain things, certain radio, and you have customers across the globe asking you for new radios, for new features. From a business perspective, I think we all agree that you would put your resources to support your customers, then go test the DU vendor that you had integrated with. But if the interfaces, if the specifications are good and the interfaces have been tested and you have automated those, then the effort becomes smaller. But I think we just need to be realistic. Expecting vendors to go and retest something that someone else changed may not be so realistic.
So it's a commitment of resources.
Right, because as you know, people cost money. All of us,
Yes,
all of
yes.
us cost money.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll do my job as an assistant to
Oh, okay.
maybe spur a bit of discussion. We all are engineers here, right? We love solving problems. Like we heard about this established status quo of relationships between big operators and big vendors, and now Open RAN is trying to disrupt that. We're saying we want to establish that trust of operators to these, let's say, newer vendors, even if they're big. Like, so where do you think are the, let's call it, vulnerable points of trust, right? Like, where does it break down today in that whole, let's call it, network deployment lifecycle? Maybe if we identify those, we could find ways to plug those holes. Or maybe trust holes or something, I don't know. Any thoughts from folks? Where are the weakest links?
Both of you.
Go,
It's
go.
okay.
It's a race. Sandbagging.
I think, again, based on my experience, what typically happens is there's always limited time to do testing, and you're always under some deliverable deadlines and things like that. So, and when a customer is expecting a deadline, I mean, you try your best to meet that deadline. Now, if I have to do a delivery, I have to cut corners to kind of do that. I would at least make sure my part is okay. I mean, I know I should probably do more exhaustive testing and other stuff, but I'm running out of time. So I probably want to cut corners and, okay, maybe at least from my perspective, let me make sure my product is okay. If it works well with not, let the customer find out. It may be another person's problem, I don't care. But at least I am safe. So I think that probably is a vulnerable point from a testing perspective, where I think when there are time and resource kind of issues like what Fujitsu was mentioning, I think we need to, sometimes we become vulnerable and from a test per process perspective. Thank you.
That's a good, so the change in the dynamic is before, and let's be real, you know, I don't care which large vendor it was. One of their business units creates a new radio, they throw it over the wall to the network group, and it takes them 9 months to integrate this radio. It's not something that happens overnight. What's happened is we've opened up the curtain now, and we see all the ugliness that was behind the curtain before. So, but they're a team all together in one place, and they're a team from one company. What you're talking about is you're talking about now there's multiple vendors. Can they act like a team in the same manner to the appearance of the customer?
So continuing on kind of a little bit on that same topic, one of the things we heard from the previous discussion was that the test plan doesn't necessarily yet fully meet the operator demands and needs, right? And so like, I don't think it's so much as they don't trust the testing or something, but the testing isn't delivering what they want to be able to say that we're using this to evaluate the RAN or the products or the combination of vendors or whatnot. And what that's leading to is a kind of a duplication of effort, right? Because it's requiring retesting in each individual operator according to how they want to focus on the testing, right? And so from that perspective, I think if we can get better confidence or better trust just in terms of building that test plan to meet their demands and their needs, so that then they will actually like utilize a common core of testing. That lessens the impact on the vendor community overall.
That's a really good point. It's
not trusting.
not, yeah, it is. There's not a basis on which to give trust yet. I mean, if you look in that regard, yeah. Yeah, Doug.
So I think the question of where the vulnerable trust links are exactly the links for all the reasons you said, right? Is when you're dealing with a single vendor, you know, when their product evolves and there's a problem, there's a single entity that's responsible for it. And in any, you know, the overall goal of opening up this marketplace and supporting multi-vendor solutions is precisely the weakest link of it, right? And, you know, there used to be at least an old saying that the government was the only one crazy enough to build a multi-vendor network because we had to take lowest bid, right? But now we're trying to promote that as a property, a good property of the marketplace. So the interop issues of products from multiple independent autonomous companies is got to be the key issue, right?
Right.
Maybe it's system integrators to the rescue, that the third party who steps in and will make whole the multi-vendor subsystem.
Where's Monica? No, I don't see her. Oh, there you are. On cue.
Yeah, the SI word, the SI letters came up, so you tried. Well done.
You almost got away with it.
Oh, this is too high. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for setting up the stage, because after this, I do have the SI round. I have the same questions coming up. So system integrator could be one of the solution for this establishing trust. It could act like a class monitor, checking up everyone did their job correctly. So now, but the thing is, there could be like 3 types of system integrator. One that could be like operator-led system integration, vendor-led system integration, or like independent system integrator. So pros and cons for everything, we'll discuss more.
Right, and I think that's a question the operators will have to answer. What kind of ecosystem do they want in the end? If we think back about to NFV, Network Functions Virtualization, there was like, I think 12
13 years ago, there was also operator group saying we need to break the monopoly of the hardware vendors, always bundling their hardware, which in the end is just a server, with their software and selling it overpriced. That's what the claim was, you know. And then they said, okay, let's separate it. We'll have a hardware layer and a software layer, and inherently it will be multi-vendor by nature. And then they forgot that somebody needs to integrate it. And they turned, after a lot of chaos, they turned to do this like integrator-led deployment. So companies like HPE, Wind River, you know, many companies, they came up and said like, okay, let us be the system integrator. We will found our ecosystem. We will pick and choose the vendors that we want to integrate, and everybody will be happy. But in the end, I'm not sure if everybody was happy. That's maybe time for another symposium to discuss. I think through this model, the innovation did not happen fast enough. There was an awful amount of fully meshed testing. The vendors of the software components almost died because they were overwhelmed with tons of testing requests, first by the operators, and then by the integrators, and then by regression testing. And nobody was buying, you know, and because after the first very euphoric movements, for example, Middle Eastern operators, we're going to virtualize 90% in 3 years, then they completely stopped the program because they noticed, yeah, functionality great, performance really bad, yeah, and so I think we need to learn from that. And we need to understand, or the operators need to tell us, like, which model do they really want, and how do they want to issue RFPs in the future? Because if you have such an ecosystem, you cannot run unbundled RFPs anymore. You can only pick and choose from the friends and family of the main integrator, or you always have to commission the same integrator again. And the integrator is not a vendor, so the integrator has no warranty. They will say, okay, we can help you integrate the next version of this third-party software, but we'll charge for it. Yeah. Whereas the vendors, that's the advantage of the old incumbent mobile vendors, they would say, we have an inherent interest in evolving our capabilities, our products. We will do it at our own cost, offer it, and then hope to get some income by selling the great new stuff. And that's, I think, one of the biggest success or fail criteria for the whole open RAN market.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I would like to extend on my unpopular opinion. So I guess the first thing, we do not want to trust other vendors, right, or other partners, because they have their own motive, their own interest, their own business, their own country's interest, right? So we want to work in a zero trust field, right, which is secure by design itself. So similar to what we were discussing, that there has to be some common test plan to sort of have a consistent, repeatable testing, irrespective of how different OT view testing, they must follow those. Then we are saying something about it. I think we have to do something similar probably for trust, that you know, if a certain lab says something about a certain product, then you trust it because of that documentation, not because you trust that lab or that particular vendor. So we have to follow zero trust principle, I think.
So, Vijay, just to clarify, when you say we, you mean
as the ecosystem,
like the royal we?
Yeah, not just academia or
just
or the test equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ajay, I'm going to call on you, my friend, because I'd love to get your feedback as the chairman of the OAT at ORAN Alliance. I'd be interested to see what you think as far as the barriers to trust may be, or the hurdles that people need to overcome. Would you be willing to speak from an ORAN Alliance OAT view? And for those that don't know, OAT is the operator advisory team for the ORAN Alliance. And I'm sure he didn't want me to call on him. But
Yeah, AJ is walking really slowly. Hoping the time is going to run out.
I said OAT. So.
Okay, good. You didn't put me that much in trouble. So I would say that I think we haven't really delved into that in OAT per se. That topic hasn't still come I do have my personal opinions, but they do not, they are by no means a reflection of the entire OAT, because we are dealing with currently some other items on our plate. So I think testing, if you have to look at, as I was telling in one of the other breakout sessions, I think there has to be some way to do, to leverage the economies of scale. And when we talk about economies of scale, that is why we are really looking for at least a bare minimum, and that can be decided by the community itself, a minimum set of testing. That becomes the first step of testing. And then I do not believe that that would be the end all. From an operator standpoint, there would still be further testing, but at least a bare minimum step would be taken. Everyone in the ecosystem, whosoever is involved, understands that yes, that is the bare minimum, and that everyone agrees. And then each operator could probably go beyond that rather than starting from ground zero. So I think that would be the way to do it. Now, I know you were delving into this trust issue. And yeah, I think the question becomes as to why would there not be trust? It seems like there are vested interests. So vested interest, even though it is shared interest in making it work, but they're still beyond that vested interest, whether they are from each vendor or from testing entities. Earlier in the conference, I think yesterday it was brought as to what the business model for these testing, OTEX or others, sustainability would be an issue. That if they share information of testing, yes, they could help the ecosystem, but could that come to bite them? And that needs to be solved by the community. I think it is not an unfounded, in my view, it is not an unfounded concern. That would need to be sorted out. Now, who sorts it? I don't have a silver bullet at this point in terms of suggesting as to who would solve this. But yes, it would have to be, if it is to be sustained, if it is to be sustainable, then I think that needs to be solved.
Thanks. Well, as chair of the TIFG, do you think that's an area where TIFG has a role in helping the OTEX work in that regard?
I mean, I guess the short answer is yes. I mean, ultimately, the ORAN Alliance, our role, especially the TIFG, is to foster the ecosystem, solve the main issues. So, but I mean, I don't want to call it the ultimate cop-out, but we are a contribution-driven organization, right? We really need members of the ORAN Alliance to help step up. We have a lot of initiatives that are underway. Again, related to trust, right? Increasing the quality of certificates and badges. How to make it really something that the operators can trust and can fully lean on. Let's say potentially in their future RFPs. Trust in the 19 OTICs, that the OTICs that actually issue these certificates and badges are trusted. I mean, those are things that, it's, again, I guess, from a relative, life cycle standpoint, we're kind of in our infancy, right? ORAN Alliance, if you think about it. And so it'll take time, but yeah, absolutely. We would love to see this happen. And by we, I mean, I guess, as a community, as ORAN Alliance, right? That's the whole idea, so.
I want to touch on one more subject because we're almost out of time of beating the horse. So we'll move to our breakouts. Ajay brought up the point that there needs to be a baseline that's tested against, and then it goes into, as we've all thought, and then we'll go into the carrier labs to test each carrier's secret sauce. The question I'm going to throw out is, So we have the first version of the ATIS MVP that was released a couple of days ago. We have the 5 carriers in Europe that have, I think now their 4th release of MVP. And so the question that I'm kind of going to throw out, I don't know if there's an answer, but is that where we go? I mean, I don't think it's, I'll be frank, from my opinion, once again, I don't know that it's ORAN Alliance that has to define that baseline. ORAN Alliance defines how to test interfaces, basically, and end-to-end performance. But some group needs to be able to say, okay, here's the baseline that all the labs can start working towards, and maybe share scripts on and that sort of thing that says, yes, okay, you get your product through this baseline testing, then indeed it's now moved into, yes, I'll bring that into my lab, or yes, when I send out an RFP, you can respond and I'll actually pay attention to you. So my question, if anybody has any thoughts on that, is that the vehicle? Is an MVP like the ATIS or the carriers in Europe MVP the answer, or is there another approach that needs to be taken? That because I can say from the ATIS MVP side, the focus was North America, and the concept was that regional differences, there are regional differences, and so what might be the most important things from a feature function standpoint in the U.S. are not necessarily the same important things, feature function set for the EU or for Asia. And to try to do a global one seems a little difficult. So it's an interesting question. Andreas, I don't know if you have a view. Oh, there you are. Well, that's what I thought. I'd just go ahead and go.
So because you mentioned the MOU of the European operators, and that is, first of all, it is and was a good step because they aligned the high-level requirements. But it requires a lot of work to translate the high-level requirements into real test plans with performance criteria, pass-fail criteria, etc. So and this is an ongoing process. And if we would have that, so I think then some of those labs, of the OTICs, etc., they can run the tests. And that would include a lot more than just the ORAN interface tests, because then we think about a fully functional system with a lot of 3GPP and other tests. But I think it's the direction to go.
So great. Well, so we are now out of time. I'm not going to make Jeremy hold up a red flag. The last thought I'll pass out before we go out to our breakout sessions, which we can, once again, in the breakout sessions, we're really looking for ways of what can we do substantively to build confidence in our products, in our approach to the market and our architecture, et cetera. So when you're working in those sessions, think about that. What is it that we can bring back to the group and say, let's work on these things together that build confidence in the process? I think that'd be a great output from what we're going to do for the next hour. So I'll pass it back over to Jeremy.
Let's thank Lauriston and Ian. All right, as Lauriston mentioned, we are doing breakouts for the next 60 minutes, and then we will come back for our final 2 sessions. For these breakout rooms, I have the clicker, same info here. So we have the same breakout rooms as this morning. I have been advised of some folks' need for vitamin D. And if you feel the need and want to host these breakout sessions outdoors, here's what I recommend. Breakout section leaders, grab the folks who are coming to your breakout, give them a few minutes to get there, and then you guys make a decision as a group if you want to go outside, or there's a pool deck out back if you're very adventurous, but there's a few seats outside. But if you'd like, feel free. But the initial setups are in the same rooms as we were in this morning. So 2 in here, first and second, 3 and 4 next door, 5 in Keystone down the hall, and 6 in Monarch where lunch was. If you do go outside, I just ask someone grab the white paper off the easel. I think you just open it up at the top and you can use that white paper. It looks like folks have been using it all along and it's been very effective, and we take photos of your notes, so that's really helpful. Or take out the little sticky notes, but you could grab your buckets and go outside with those if you'd like. So, all right.
So can we, I think some of the breakout session leaders have been updated, so.
Yes,
maybe
thank
we
you.
can run through those.
Yeah, those are my other 2 notes here. For number 2, what makes consistent testing valuable to customers? What do you get when the testing is done? Ian Wong is taking that from Andy Thiessen.
We're going to the pool.
And you're going to the pool. The pool deck. Stay out of the water.
Not in the pool, beside.
Okay, the pool. Dip your toes in. All right, number 4. Where am I? Number 4. So Gustavo's not with us. So Julie Cup is going to take number 4. And Ku. Okay.
I think the
Our
quote
backup
was going to get
leaders
a little
are
too
taking
crowded,
A
guys.
little bit advantage of their positions. No, just kidding. All right, so let's give it another hour. I commend you for participating. Thank you so much. And let's come back. Well, after an hour, you'll go on break. Yes, we have a 15-minute break at 3 o'clock. So please break at 3 and then come back into this room at 3:15. Thank you.
Very much. Next
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking your seats. We are reconvening for the last 2 sessions. Don't everybody clap all at once. All right. Hope you enjoyed getting a little bit of vitamin D. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here today. All right. Let me see. Sorry. Our reconvening and reporting out for breakout sessions. This one is from all of the 2 o'clock yes, breakout sessions. Our leaders here, and I don't know if you're going to call up the breakout leaders. Okay, but we will kick this off again with Lauriston and Ian.
All right, we'll get right to it. So let's get the report outs from the breakout sessions. So we'll start with breakout session number 1, which was, how can buyers trust that a lab produces consistent, repeatable, worldwide testing? Ganesh, it's up to you, buddy.
Come on down.
You're the next contestant.
We should do that. We should have an old band playing. Okay. Yes, it's towards the late in the day, guys. Yes.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We had an interesting discussion, an intensive discussion as well. And the topic was, how can buyers trust that a lab produces consistent, repeatable, and worldwide testing? So we discussed several aspects of what the labs do today, how the vendors participate, what is the role MNOs play in terms of consuming those results, and so on. So I grouped them around 7 topics or headings. Maybe there is some overlap in that, but all these are captured in the Google Docs. So first and foremost, it's about the lab capabilities, right? And we also we removed the term OTIC, or we did not want to restrict it to the OTIC labs. So any lab that is doing the ORAN or Open RAN testing, we just meant when we say lab, it could be an OTIC lab. It may not be an OTIC lab. So there has to be a minimum set of capabilities that need to be defined and agreed upon, at least, let's say, meeting some of the regional MVP profiles or the requirements of that region for that lab to be acceptable, saying that that lab does indeed have capabilities to produce results which are trustable, because it may be hard to admit, but there is a difference in the capabilities of different labs today. So based on what they have in terms of lab capabilities and infrastructure, they may test to a satisfactory extent or not. So that needs to be sorted out. Maybe it is ORAN Alliance or TFG which may revisit this question. Jan is here as a TFG co-chair, but this needs to be ensured as a basic thing, basic prerequisite to make sure that the results which are coming out of these labs are indeed trustable. And from the test equipment vendor point of view, there was a point made about making sure the test equipment is also calibrated, the test equipment are also calibrated in a uniform and consistent basis, so that the reliability, or at least the consistency of the results, are the same across any 2 labs, whichever region they are from, right? And apparently there have been issues of differences between 2 different labs using the same equipment because they were not calibrated well. And we also discussed about the process aspects and accreditation. So one observation that was discussed is the the seriousness and diligence, the responsibility of the test lab on how deeply they are involved, especially in aspects like vendors do change any hardware, software aspects of the system under test. And when they are doing these changes during the time of test execution, the test lab should have an insight into why they are doing it, for what reason, and is it for a justified reason or not, because some changes might invalidate the test results that have been already obtained. So there has to be some fidelity and believability to that result anyway. So that is the process of oversight and diligence from the test lab. And we also talked about the lab accreditation and ISO certification and the need for the regular audit of these labs to make sure that the labs indeed are doing a fine job of certifying running these test cases. Right? And we did focus on the documentation of the results, which is the verifiable record which an MNO or anyone who is deploying these products will have a faith or trust in the level of details which are being captured. One obvious thing that came out and which was already highlighted in multiple discussions is the settings and configurations which are not well documented, well captured today in the results presentation in the records. That is one, and test results and complete logs. I believe that is already being done in most of the labs today. The other interesting aspect which we discussed about is when test cases fail or not consistently running successfully, is that even captured or noted? There are notes, are there notes to even note that this was not consistently passing or what it took to make it pass, right? So those nuances are minor observations, the observations which may be of insight, they need to be captured as well. And we also thought it is nice to have a mechanism of giving feedback to the vendors at the end of the test cycle on what they need to improve. That may be a way to improve the products in general. And we went further in terms of the test results reporting and their presentation in terms of how we capture the results. Certain things like throughput, latency, and jitter, which are some could be statistically varying, and until and unless you have a good number of test runs, you don't get the actual value of the variances accurately. So applying some statistical methods to get those values of standard deviation, mean, average, everything, to give more credibility to the test results which are being reported, and the notes on the variances observed. And we also talked about the differences that happen between one snapshot of the baseline of the system and another version. What are the test results? Are they degrading or not, or improving? If they are degrading, for what reasons, and those things. And there should also be focus on testing under more impaired conditions, because the operators tend to believe that labs are always ideal conditions and there is not enough impairment happening in the lab environment. So how do we make sure that we are doing more impairments for focused testing, whether it's front haul, radio environment, or any type of transport? Right? That's another thing. The next two topics were like, what are the minimum expected capabilities in the lab, and what are the nice to have capabilities in the lab? So from the minimum expected capabilities, we expect the labs to do all the conformance and IoT tests very well. So that's expected as a minimum. And in terms of repeatability, there is also expectation that the labs would have done enough automation to repeat those results to have the credibility of the results. And nice to have capabilities, we talked about having an outdoor environment or doing some type of testing called exploratory testing, which is going off script, so as to say, which is not there in the test specs, and then somebody by their sheer expertise are able to create scenarios on the fly and test them. Maybe that adds the value from a value addition point of view of a lab. Maybe that's one thing that they can do. And we also talked about long-run stability tests, which may be a good thing, nice to have thing for a lab. And finally, there was a beautiful point made about building confidence in the test results. The way the test results are accessible today, it's semi-open, because if you are part of the ORAN Alliance, you have a level of access to the test results, sometimes the slide presentation, sometimes the actual test results if you're operator. But is ORAN Alliance or the respective labs, are they doing enough to put these things in the public domain? Meaning, anonymized results is one great suggestion that was given. How often do we put it? And how often do we even show the trending of these things, how we are improving in certain areas. Maybe the frontal interoperability is an area of improvement for, in general, for all of the ORM-based vendors. Do we even trend that and show, right? Is this available in a public domain website or something? And we also talked about the validity of the certificates issued, because this is on a snapshot like every certificate is, but how does one go for a recertification if there has been a major revision of hardware or software? How do we handle that part? I'm not sure if there is a process in TFG or OTIC for that. And finally, the suggestion is to, this is only a suggestion, is to compare and contrast the performance of the labs in terms of not ranking them, because there may be some real limitation, practical limitations on what they are able to do, but over a period of time, how many tests are they doing? What type of tests are they doing? Introps, certification, badges. What is their level of activity and what is the level of expertise they are bringing? How a particular lab is performing compared to the other labs. Maybe that's another way of improving, strengthening the the value of the labs, right? So that's the last suggestion. So overall, it was a great discussion. We have captured everything in the Google Docs. If there is anything that I have missed, please, whoever participated, if I have missed a point, please add here. Thank you.
Yeah, so don't leave. So we're gonna ask for questions after each presentation today. So thank you. And the question, does anybody have any additional comments or questions on this point? Okay, that was easy.
Oh, cool.
Oh, Ku is, no.
Oh, no, okay.
Getting ready to talk, so you know.
Apologies.
I thought it was great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ganesh.
Okay, moving on to the next number 2. This is what makes consistent testing valuable to customers? What do you want to get? Oh,
okay.
So now, okay, we're jumping the line again. Okay, well, because it's you, Ku, I'll do this. Okay, so we're actually going to number 4, which is how do we demonstrate performance parity to legacy systems? And Ku is standing in for Julie, who's standing in for Gustavo.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to skip the queue. So again, thank you for all the contributors for staying back for this breakout session. So just reporting on behalf of the team. So we discussed in terms of the importance of defining the RAN performance benchmarking methodology, and all this information they updated on the Google Docs already online. So starting to look at, benchmarking and getting the performance figures of the traditional base station. And then, we discussed mainly about from the macro networks perspective. I think in terms of indoor small cells, it seems that the interest may not be so high as compared to outdoors macro cell. And then comparing that to the single vendor base station ORAN implementation, then again, comparing the performance of the multi-vendor base station with ORAN implementation. So you start to look at having 3 sets of benchmarking numbers that you can look at from traditional perspective to single vendor ORAN implementation to multi-vendor ORAN implementation. So it's a methodical approach, right, to try to get to that point. And then obviously we talked about the performance benchmarking test cases. So the starting point is to be able to make sure that the test scenarios which are defined are highly representative of operators' deployments, right? In terms of the number of UEs, we know that for the operators, the commercial networks they deploy today, they don't just serve like 1, 2, or 10 UEs. Like it's going to be a few hundred UEs connected to the base stations. So the number of UEs, the radio channel impairments in the live deployments, the radio channels are not perfect. We talked about as well in terms of the transport network impairments in the lab, right? Basically, you can have the RU and DU connected through a fiber, which basically 0 impairments in terms of latency, jitter and packet loss. But in the live network, there's going to be like routers and switches deployed and stuff like that. The mobility profiles, and as well as in terms of the mixed end user service and application traffic. So those are really important. Then you need to make sure that the measurements and KPIs are properly defined for performance test cases. So we discuss things around in terms of the accessibility metrics, the reliability, retainability, availability, mobility, including energy consumption, the efficiency, among others. So this is going to be included as part of the performance KPIs. Then needing to make sure that you have consistent repeatable testing, because obviously you want to make sure that if you are doing multiple repeated testing on the same device under test, like for example, the single vendor base station or multi-vendor base station, you want to be able to make sure that you get the same test results. You do not want to have a test run whereby the performance is saying that, the capacity of the cell or the base station is certain megabits per second, and then you run the test again, then it basically degrades. You want to make sure that you get fair comparison across all the vendors. So there are things like, for example, the input parameters that are needing to be clearly specified. So I think this has come up multiple times in terms of making sure that the test cases has to define things like, for example, the TDD slot formats. You do not want a case whereby this is actually not defined, so you try to run performance test cases, and the performance results end up different. And there are things like, for example, carrier bandwidth, right? You do not want to benchmark throughput performance of a base station for a carrier that's actually been configured for 20 megahertz versus 10 megahertz, because we know that the results will be different. And ensuring that there's going to be apple to apple comparison as much as possible, including the DUT capabilities. So like, for example, you do not want to be comparing, to radio unit category A versus category B, because that's not fair. And then the configuration, things like, for example, the new radio deployment options, SA versus SA, NSA versus NSA. Are you planning to use network slicers or not? If you're planning to use network slicers, then what are the slice configuration from a QoS perspective? The test durations as well has been discussed, not just from a performance, single run perspective, but to be able to run the performance test cases for long term, right? 24 hours, 48 hours, 3-day soak test, or even more. And then the test case would be obviously, right now we're not looking at having a single deployment scenario, but as well as in terms of having different device capabilities that are designed for different subscriber numbers, for example, connected number of UEs. So there has to be extensible to cater for these variations and options. The other thing we discussed as well is that in terms of the device under test or system under test information, got to be locked in terms of the hardware, software options and configuration as part of the test reports. So after all these are defined, basically we look at what we can try to leverage from the industry. For example, the test cases written by ORAN Alliance, leverage as much as we can, and then to be able to develop new test cases to fill in the gaps. I think this part is really important, but we don't just develop the new test cases for the sake of developing the new ones, but to be able to make sure that we set the objective, right? Making sure that the test cases that we're trying to create is going to be operator objective driven to get as close as possible to the live network deployment scenarios. That's really key. And finally, in terms of the test execution, all the test cases got to be executed using test automation and the reporting outputs with machine readable reports as much as possible. Obviously, things like KPI matrices and stuff like that. So you can try to look at effective benchmarking comparison, reducing manual, intervention or efforts. But obviously there are limitations, right, in terms of what you can try to put into the machine readable format. And that's it, right? So again, thank you for all the contributors for providing your feedback and inputs.
Okay, you don't get to leave just yet. Questions? Okay, well, I have one.
Yes.
So a lot of your discussion was comparing to benchmarks.
Correct.
From presently operating networks. How do you expect to get that benchmark data?
There are certain consortiums which are funded by the governments today, which basically allows an environment that for tier 1 vendors to bring in their base stations for benchmarking. So we do have those in place today, and some of those are quite a few of us are basically in those consortiums.
Okay, and because I know even within different MNO networks, those benchmarks are going to be different, depending on what their service set is. And what their SLAs are. So that'll be an interesting thing to come out to try to figure out how do we get these, because it's definitely important to be able to make the performance and feature parity comparisons. But we're going to need that benchmarking data.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think another thing interesting as well is that we look at benchmarking, obviously from a performance perspective, but some of the operators are basically saying that we need to be able to make sure that we include energy consumption efficiency as well, because that's going to be an important part of the OpEx, right? Not just the regular accessibility, availability, retainability, mobility kind of KPIs.
Any other questions? All right, you get to go to the airport, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks, Coop.
All right, thank you, team.
All right, moving back, we're going to go back to number 2 now. What makes consistent testing valuable to customers? What do you get when the testing is done? And you're not only the assistant, but you're
Yes.
now a stand-in for Peter, who was a stand-in for Andy. So please, Ian.
So we had a great time by the pool. So for those of you who found us, it was actually a bit of a trek. But, and we got the good table, and unfortunately, Julie and Koo, you guys got the riff. We beat you to it. So, so I'm not going to go through all the details. It's in the doc. What we tried to do, I mean, there were a lot of discussions. Started off with, you know, consistent testing valuable to customers. It's like we talked about. Okay, if it's inconsistent, that's really a big issue. It's almost like table stakes to be repeatable, consistent. So we kind of just started talking about who's the customer. There's the operator as a customer, and in fact, the vendor itself as a customer with different, potentially different care abouts, let's put it that way. So I think that we kind of trended more now eventually towards a couple of key points, right? That we were able towards the end of the session to gain a bit of general agreement, okay, which is not easy. So one thing that came out that is generally agreed upon is, I think, you know, this concept of a very rigorous governance model, right? In the sense of very clear. I mean, I think ORAN Alliance, of course, is a great candidate to continue to do that. Make the criteria clear. Test plans should be rigorous. There's a general consensus that where we are today in terms of the tests are not as rigorous as they can be. Hence, there's not a lot of, doesn't breed as much confidence, right? So I think Doug made a really good point on, and I think with general agreement from a lot of folks, is that maybe just try to do less things better. You know, focus on, you know, from an SDO standpoint, the conformance towards the specs, let's make that really rigorous, and create a program around that, wherein the OTICs are, we talked about OTIC accreditation as well, making sure that there's again, going back to trust in the OTICs, in the certificates coming out of the OTICs. There's this general understanding as well. I mean, there was initially not that much consensus on, you know, should we focus more on just the conformance, the basic stuff versus system level performance. Eventually, I think everybody felt that the system level performance is critical, definitely for a lot of the bigger operators around the world. I think Lincoln kind of made a few good points there that have kind of brought folks in and say, yeah, we kind of have extract those common system level performance tests and make them, you know, repeatable across the different regions. I guess utilizing the outputs of MVP and the MOU group to kind of create those test plans. I think there were several folks that brought up, you know, TIP as another organization, wherein, you know, that type of system level test plan is, you know, can be created, you know, deriving from these, you know, the European MOU and eventually, hopefully, from the ADIS MVP. I think that's, I would say, the long and short of it is, you know, yeah, I don't know if team, if I missed anything, but those are the key takeaways that I got.
Any other feedback from the members of the group or any questions? Okay, thank you. Sure. All right, so we're now moving on. Abdel, you can come on up while I'm telling what is about number 3. The question was, are badging and certification enough? Is there something more specific that can be done to address M&O needs? And this is, Tommy, it's really interesting to me.
As much as it's interesting, I think we joined forces with Breakout 4.
Is this mic on? Your mic on?
Yeah, now it is.
It is? Yeah, so we joined forces with Breakout 4 and we kind of split the time, so. And we were at the pool as well. Exactly, yeah. So we covered a few aspects of badging and certification and the importance of that. So the first question was the main drivers of badging and certifications. And the discussion was about creating a performance baseline to the industry. So new entries and forums would understand what kind of baseline we are kind of setting or what is the bar being set on. And then the most important aspect of all of this is to reduce the testing for operators. That then can become a component for RFPs, and we discussed that in details later on. But then if we do have a kind of a baseline that can guarantee a specific performance, then this could potentially allow tier 2 operators to start adopting Open RAN. We haven't discussed that much, but this is definitely something that can drive the whole ecosystem forward. And then the last thing on this point was it's a market enablement and opportunities to even vendors, specifically smaller vendors. Then we kind of covered what areas of badging and certifications we're looking on. There's many areas. There's the conformance, interoperability, end-to-end testing, functional, performance. Performance can cover all aspects of resiliency, reliability, stress testing, etc. But the main focus for operators, no doubt, is on the end-to-end testing. But then again, what is end-to-end testing? What elements should be included in end-to-end testing? Because as an operator, they would like to reduce their testing, but they want to make sure that the SMO is working, the OCloud is there, the RIC is there. But as mentioned earlier, we probably need to walk before we start running. So I think the basic of end-to-end testing will be CU, DU, RU, get the feature parity. Create that baseline to the industry and then take it on the next step. And then the other area was how can we make these certifications and badges worthy and valuable? So we don't want them to become a marketing tool for smaller vendors to kind of pursue because they may think that this could help with some kind of publicity. And then at the same time, get the value to the operators. So the operators would really think that there's a value out of that. And that was, so we discussed how to kind of get confidence out of the system performance and not use it as a marketing tool. But this would also always go back to test plans and how good these are written and what's the success criteria that are associated with these test plans. Another area we covered is how to encourage vendors to participate in badging and certifications. No vendor would like to be at the, be tested or assessed. So one thing is that obviously there needs to be some kind of a commercial route or opportunity to these vendors. On that would definitely solve the problem if operators will mandate this in their RFP process, but this would never happen only if there's true value out of these certifications and there's a kind of a baseline that we can meet. Another factor is the competitive factor. So if vendor A is there and vendor B would think that they will be missing out, so they would be willing to participate. And then they will be giving publicity to vendors in terms of, they will be on the ORAN Alliance websites, or they will be in Tip Exchange, so they will have some kind of publicity. And the last point in this is quality assurance efficiencies and lessons learned. So vendors would learn a lot from these exercises. And then the other point was, how do we think that MNOs can mandate these kind of badges and certifications in their procurement process? And Karsten drew a very nice progress bar where he had it as an operational readiness from 0 to 100%. And we kind of agreed we're still at the infant stages at the moment. And then the valuable worthiness of these badges and certifications is probably at 50%. So once there's around 50% of readiness on these badges, we probably would see these starting creeping in the RFP processes of operators, while the operator target is typically at 80% with the 80-20% rule. 80% of testing should be carried out in these kind of frameworks of certification and badges, and then 20% are left for operators to carry out in their own labs. The last point was if there's anything else other than badging and certifications the MNO wants. And then we just said that anything that minimizes testing, provides system performance and confidence and shorter timelines to deploy commercial solutions is what the operators need, either through badging and certifications or through some other kind of enablement. And then the last point is recommendations. I think two main recommendations out of that. First, obviously, we've been talking through it in the last 3 days about tightening test plans, making sure that we have strong test plans that clearly define not only the test cases, but also the success criteria, the test environments, all of the repeatability and consistency that we were discussing. And then the labs element is also important, but I think the test plans need to be fixed first before we can start talking about how OTICs can share information together and create a certain quality baseline. The last point here is the collaboration and information sharing amongst the certification bodies and the badging bodies. I think this is paramount. It's very important that we join forces towards a common goal. We need to reduce duplications. We need to complement each other, and we need to make sure that if one body is issuing a test plan or test cases, how this is fed into another body. So we have Accord, we have Oran Alliance, we have TIP, we have ATIS, and there's many more. And it's good to have this kind of a wide ecosystem that kind of strive towards these kind of performance level testing. But we must not be in a position that we kind of duplicating each other and not working towards a common goal. So these are the kind of the main discussions we had and the main findings.
Thank you. Any questions in the process? One of the things you touched on that I really liked, and we didn't talk at all about, we have been, seem to have been very focused on tier one operators throughout the whole conference here. And the concept there's a lot of tier two and tier three operators. Now, at least I can say from the US standpoint, they generally are fast followers. They're going to see what tier one operators do, and that's what they're going to do because they neither have the ability to control the product, and also they don't necessarily have all the testing capabilities put in. However, there's an area where we might break the mold. So that's something interesting that I got that we could think about in that process, and how do we address their needs that may be different than the tier one operators. So interesting. Thank you.
I do want to add on to that because we did talk about a little bit about the ORX model from NTT Docomo on how, at least they have this business model now in collaboration with NEC, right, of selling these almost like these blueprints and system integration for tier two MNOs. We talked about it, but again, we reverted back to the focus on tier ones, but that could be a potential model as well.
Interesting. All right, now we're going to number 5, Charles, who's not standing in for anybody but Charles. So this is breakout number 5. Are technology readiness levels, otherwise known as TRLs, necessary? And I can say from the Innovation Fund standpoint, if you've seen the NOFO 1 and NOFO 2, we use TRLs and manufacturing readiness levels. They had their applicability there, but it's an interesting question to pose.
Thank you. All right, so we had a very interesting discussion today, and if I'm to just go back to the question, are TRL levels necessary? I don't think we came to a conclusion on that in the group. Instead, the group presented more questions, and so I'll quickly go through them, and then I'll give you my position and Sonic Lab's position, and then we can take it from there. So our group was attended by MNOs, TNM vendors, open source community, big vendors, Fujitsu, and a lab. So I think we were very well represented in our group. We started off by trying to understand, is TRL the right benchmark for Open Run? And how is it different from the badging, the previous badging conversation we've had? So in order to try and explain that, we started off by going back to the definitions of TRLs. What do they actually mean, and what are the levels that we're talking about here? So there are two main references, one from NASA and the other one from the European Union Both of them have got 9 levels that range from very basic principles, that's level 1, all the way to level 9, which is the actual system being deployed in a real world environment. So those are the 9 levels that we are talking about, and we tried to stick our conversation to those 9 levels. Of course, the obvious question from the team was, why do we only have 9? Can't we have 11 levels? So we confined the discussion to those 9 levels. So is TRL a better benchmark than badging? The fact that you've got a little bit more granularity, it looks like it's giving more information than a badge would give, but then it also opens up other questions regarding the level of granularity that you're going to. So again, another open question. Who will be using these TRLs? Are we designing the TRLs for the benefit of the MNOs, or are we designing these TRLs mainly for the benefit of the vendors or the test labs? So who's going to be the end user? And this would inform the usefulness of the TRLs. And then the other open questions, as I said, there's several open questions from our discussion. The other open question was, is this TRL approach a welcome endeavor for the vendors, considering that they have overhead for all the other certifications that we've been discussing in this conference, you know, the badging, certifications, conformance testing, end-to-end testing, all these things. Now, if you add TRL to that, is that an additional overhead to them? Okay. Another aspect of the TRLs that we try to discuss is in what context do you classify these TRLs? Because Open Run, unlike the systems, previous systems, Open Run has got disaggregated components, the RU, CU, DU components. Do you award the TRL on a component basis? So is it on an individual component basis? Or do you award the TRL on a group of components? For example, CU, DU, some vendors do that. Or do you award the TRL on a system-wide level, so end-to-end system? That's an open question, and depending on how you answer that, you could go to conformance, or unconformance is on a per product basis, or badging, which is on the system-to-system level. So we think that the TRL, if we adopted that approach, would have to consider TRLs for individual products and TRL for sub-products or groups of products, as well as TRL for the end-to-end system. Within Sonic Lab, we've done some of these exercises to try and tease out what do these levels mean. So in our framework, which we will share after this conference, is TRL levels from 1 to 6 or on a product level. So as an individual product within the Open Run system cannot have more than 6, because on its own it cannot do anything. It requires all the other components. The levels 7 to 9 are reserved for end-to-end systems. So the CUD are all together, because that actually provides the run system. And then from between 7 and 9, you have a differentiation on the features and the performance of each of those systems. So that is our view, but I'm sure we'll get feedback from you guys. The other point that came up was the TRLs, the context in which you award the TRL, so the deployment scenario. So if you've got a scenario where you're developing a CUD for an indoor environment, and then you have another scenario where you're developing CUD for an outdoor environment, the TRLs of these products would be different, because the requirements on the indoor is different from the requirements on the outdoor. Just on the transmit power itself, it's different. We also came to the conclusion that the TRLs would also have to incorporate the use case that that the product is going to be used for. So a very good example is if you had a use case that was a very low latency use case, like sensing data from a field and then transmitting that over periodic intervals, that doesn't require as much throughput or performance requirements. So the TRL should somehow reflect that use case. On the other hand, if you had a high bandwidth type of use case that required more performance and less energy saving characteristics, then the TRL should reflect that. So the way we think that can be captured is the TRL should incorporate the scenario, the deployment scenario and the use cases with, that the ORAN products would be used for. So that was another one. We also had a discussion around TRLs being mainly used for policy and decision making. And this is from legacy because the policy folk are used to TRLs. It's something that's well known in NASA, in Europe, etc. So it would help when you're discussing Open RAN to use TRLs to the policy people because that is something that they are familiar with. But then from an engineering perspective, if it doesn't make sense to the engineer, then maybe there could be a need to translate the tip badging, for example, or ORAN certification, to translate that into a TRL level. So on the one hand, you can talk to the engineers using the tip badging and certification metrics, and then on the other hand, translate that into a TRL level that policy people can understand, and that way you have this communication across. I thought that was a very good point that came up in the discussion today. Finally, we came down with a few, I know Julie tasked us to note down actions and way forward. So we modified that a little bit and said actions and open questions because we couldn't agree on some of these things. The very first one was that OTICs, these OTIC labs that we've been discussing about, discussing all these conferences, could use TRL levels instead of badging because of the level of granularity that's involved in the TRL definitions. So that's one alternative. The other point was the TRLs should be both component-based, individual component-based, system-based, as well as collections of systems. So there could be a pair of products within the RAN. CUD is a good example that work together as a pair, but they're not the whole entire system. So you'd have a TRL for that pair of products. TRLs should be application or use case aware. And then we had a very good comment from our MNO participant, which is the TRL is a grading system that is biased towards larger vendors who have more components of the overall system. And I found this quite interesting, and I think it's a bit true if you actually think about it. So the end result would perform much better. That means it would get a higher TRL. And if one vendor has more of the components in the RAN space, then they tend to naturally shift the system towards higher performance. So somehow we have to make sure that this TRL grading system has got oversight where this bias can be acknowledged and maybe even remedied if possible. Then the other comment was whatever TRL system Open RAN chooses to use, it's got to be transparent to the vendors, to the operators, and as well as the test and measurement vendors. And then the final comment was we should not use it actually is similar to the previous session. We should not use the TRL ranking as a marketing gimmick. It should have underlying technical tests and test cases that actually correspond to each of these TRL levels. At the very bottom of the notes that we've submitted on the Google Doc, we have put our representation of the TRLs as Sonic Lab, and we welcome comments and feedback on that, and anybody who's interested in that, we can share the documents with you and we can take it from there. For the team that joined the TRL discussion, thank you very much, and if I've missed anything, feel free to add it now or in the questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Your point about TRL associated with policy more than technology within the Innovation Fund and NOVO 1, NOVO 2, yes, we use them as just a measure of technical maturity in the process. It really wasn't within the same structure as you've seen with NASA or with DoD in the process. It was a way to try to communicate that technical maturity question more than anything else. So you're spot on there on the policy side. Any other questions or comments?
So I'm just curious, like with the TRL levels, one of the things it seems like is that it's a little bit more of like a self-declaration approach to things compared to like the certification, the badging program that's tied directly to, outcomes of testing and stuff like that. So did the team, you mentioned you talked a little bit, there might need to be like a translation between those two things and stuff like that. But beyond that approach, was there any discussion on how you'd go about setting what level something was, or it was more about are the levels themselves useful?
So no, we didn't get to that level of discussion, but you make a very valid point. It would have to be overseen in a similar way like the badging or the certification is with TIP and Oran Alliance. I'm not aware of anybody out there that's trying to set TRLs for Open Run, so maybe it could be an action from this conference. So.
Charles, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and we move on. Monica, if you want to come on up. He speaks with an accent and they give him applause. Now I understand. So breakout number 6, system integration, which is just a huge issue. So this should be fun.
So first of all, the previous group, did you get some extra time? I don't know how you discussed so many topics. We were just stuck with 3 and even didn't complete that much. Okay, so we started with a good set of quorum and didn't expect this level of energy after lunch and 3 days of discussions. Thank you all for the contribution. Our topic was system integration. We started with 3 major questions in mind. Who is responsible for system integration? What's the scope of system integration? And the roles of system integration testing and challenges. So who is responsible for SI roles? Here we started with 3 options. 1, operator-led system integration, vendor-led system integration, and independent system integration. Also went through a few examples of current situation with like Rakuten and Dish models and evaluated pros and cons for each of SIs, such as operator-led system integration. They have operational expertise of their network, which will save them some cost, but at the risk of lack of expertise in vendor system itself. While vendor-led system SI would have expertise of products, but can come with little bias and will favor their preferred combinations. Independent SIs, while they have expertise in bringing all products together, but this will come at an extra cost to an operator. When I put all of my group into the operator's shoes and asked them to choose which options would they prefer, it varied a lot between the whole group. And then later we came to an agreement that it won't be best fit, like one size won't fit everyone, and there should be a hybrid option using all 3 of them. Then we dwelled into what's the scope and roles of SI. This include integration, vendor management, end-to-end testing, development, and all-time lifecycle management. So while the integration, it's simple, operators will need to outsource in some of the integration efforts to an extent, but till what extent? May it be vertically, horizontally, it still remains a question. And what part of information or network information operator will share to an integrator? The conclusion was probably, again, the hybrid model will come into the picture where operator keeps like the SMO part to themselves to manage and give the rest part to an integrator. Vendor management will be an important role for sure. This we have seen and observed during the Plug Fests. System integrators could take over end-to-end testing responsibilities and do a lifecycle management as well. While the big challenge still remains the lifecycle management, there was some good suggestion that a system integrator could release and maintain their own software release of certain combinations, and operators can pick from this certain combinations And if they want anything else, that can come at extra cost. Other challenges with hybrid model would also be like an accountability. If it's hybrid model, then the question comes back to ground zero. Who would be accountable if there is an outage? Yeah, I personally, and between the group, there was a thing that in hybrid model, the accountability will not be much of an issue, where some of us beg to differ. We said no, accountability will be an issue, but yeah, it's an open-ended question. Then key takeaways from our whole session was, be it in-house versus third-party or vendor SI, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to an SI in Open RAN, and all operators will need to evaluate based on their capabilities and need, and probably will follow a hybrid model. SI could bring in vendor management, lifecycle management, integration, and testing support with them. Cost efficiency, while Open RAN promises CapEx and OpEx, but achieving those savings would require significant SI and testing challenges. And obviously, the standardization efforts will be needed to overcome all this. And that would be all.
Great, thank you. Any questions? I mean, this is a big topic. One of the things that's most interesting, because we spent all the time in Innovation Fund starting to look at what we call private enterprise market. And that market, in many cases, is actually dominated by the SIs. You know, you want a private enterprise system. You go to an SI. You don't go to a vendor or a carrier in the process many times. So there's an interesting model that maybe can be explored a bit in how you would apply that to a larger operator.
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely things to explore. And even there was one point which I personally feel like, will this system integration, there will come costs with Open RAN, which is not there in traditional network yet. So how would you compare this cost? Will this be like much more better eventually and still justify the CapEx and OpEx cost, which we say is lower in ORAN, or will it remain the same?
Very interesting. But yeah, you start to look at the TCO model in the process. Yeah. Any questions? All right, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I'm supposed to now turn it over to Jeremy. So I'll just say thank you, because it's a very interesting. You were trying. I cut it off. So we started out saying building trust in the process, and realized that there's many dimensions to this process. And one of the things that I think you'll find we're going to do is go back from not just this session, but all the sessions of this symposium, and look at the notes. You know, they're available on the Google Doc, and start trying to bubble up exactly the things we were talking about. In this case, what are those confidence building measures that we can now start to take? And what are the ones that we need to address as a whole, that we can address individually in the process? Because in the end, as I said earlier, perception becomes reality. So if people perceive there's a risk, then there's a risk, whether it's true or not. So in our process, we have to change the perception of the market in some respects, and I think we've started down that path today. So thank you very much for your time, and I guess I turn it back over to Jeremy.
I get to stay. Yay me.
For what it's worth, Lauriston, I would clap for your Georgian accent. The Southern accent is. All right. That concludes our last interactive workshop of the symposium. So that's an achievement. I would like us all to give the discussion leaders, breakout session leaders, all a hand for their efforts. And thank you so much. From my vantage point, it's been hugely successful. I know it's taken a lot of energy. And we just thank you for keeping that up even on the third day. So a lot of good outcomes. And as Lorison mentioned, the Google Doc is available, and it sounds like it's being updated regularly. And I do encourage everyone to upload notes and get that document up to date this week, as if you needed anything else to do for this symposium. Okay, we will wrap up with a discussion on collaboration. This will be led by Ian Wong from Viavi. He's not off the hook yet. And TIFG co-chair, assisted by Ollie Anderson from the Telecom Infra Project. This discussion on collaboration is pretty critical. That's all right. To identify projects with strongest support, ask for 2 people to lead each topic and arrange interim meetings to progress on all of the work that we're about to assign ourselves. But with that said, we have about 65 minutes to do this.
Hello, hello. I'm sure everybody wants to stay that whole 65 minutes, right? Let's finish in 10. By the way, assisted by Ollie, and Ollie assisted by ChatGPT.
Of course. All right.
So I think the action, it sounds like, is we need to identify the key. It's hard to summarize 2 days worth of discussions. We only have the Google Docs to kind of rely on. So when Ollie and I were chatting, it's like, how are we going to do this? And great, brilliant suggestion on AI.
Yeah. So I did do some pre-work.
Okay, you did.
Ian. So obviously, during the past 3 days, I think we have a lot of notes, a lot of actions that the community can take, and I think we can all agree that the test plan, test case development, addressing improvements in that area is clearly one follow-up topic.
Sorry.
So just, short, the thumb rule. So what we kind of hope to do for this last session is see if things have struck people as they've gone through the 3 days. Maybe they heard something from a lightning talk where they thought they could do collaboration. Maybe they heard something from a breakout session. So kind of try to identify anybody that's willing to volunteer to work on a collaborative project in the near term. And then what we'd like to do is have folks meet every, month or two and work on those collaborations and then report back at the next IORS. We're also going to be doing a readout for anything that we saw from all the notes that we could feed back to, like ORAN Alliance, or maybe TIP could help with certain things. So just see if we can come up with any action items, if anybody's, and it doesn't have to be today, people could take it back, and it has to align with people's business models, and they could take it back and think about it. But if we could start getting the ball rolling on, because I would really love to have some action steps come out of this.
Yep.
So we have an open mic. I guess, Julie, what you're suggesting? So, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think one thing that maybe will be helpful, because I think everybody here is itching to volunteer to drive some initiatives, I'm sure. But I seriously, I did try to use the summarizer and just tried to see what came out of the 2 days. And I'm just going to read through a bit. Full disclaimer, right? This is from a robot. So there are a few things. So 1, 2, 3. I don't have a way to share the screen, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were 7 key points that came out. So the first one is test collaboration. Collaboration among labs is essential for defining the test procedures. Effort should be divided among the labs to achieve common goals. Security testing at common levels, the physical layer, are crucial. So that's key points on test collaboration came out. Test procedures. Tests should focus on consistency, repeatability, protocol compliance, no surprise. Leveraging differentiating capabilities of test labs is important, kind of going back to the different labs focusing on different things. Recommendations to include developing a quality control program and standardizing test tool configuration. So that's another one. That's item number 2. Number 3 is workforce development. Existing labs can provide workforce development through academic programs, industry certifications, aligning curricula to new developments. Point number 4, security. Security consideration, security collaboration, emphasize the need for security testing, spectrum sharing, crucial for security. This one interestingly came out. Consistent, repeatable international testing, across different locations, test beds, peer review, test automation frameworks, gathering, sanitizing, maintaining test data. System integration in ORAN, so requires evaluating capabilities, potentially following a hybrid model, came out of. System integrators can provide services like vendor management, standardization efforts are crucial. And finally, certification and badging on OTICs, right? The quality is a key focus. Policies promoting test results that is, consistent, repeatable, kind of same keywords came out. So anyway, those are some of the key takeaways. I don't know if anything strikes some folks, and if maybe Ollie, if you have, and we can go from there. Put the Google Doc into, and I'm sure there's going to be some. Doug asked what is the input to this summarizer, and it's the Google Doc, yeah.
All right. Why don't we get going? Let's pick up some of those areas and see that, if people want to volunteer and contribute. I would start with the test case, test plan era. So obviously, ORAN Alliance will, I think it was noted multiple times that, we need to work on the ORAN test cases, make them better. Ian, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
So yeah, I think kind of going back to ORAN Alliance being contribution driven, I think almost all of you are contributor members, operator members. There is a general sense that we can do better in terms of the test specifications, the test cases, make them more rigorous, make the certification badging process more rigorous. So in fact, this is an active discussion within TIFG, right? It's not new. But again, we need contributors. So it would be great if we get somebody to really sign up. Thank you, Dinkan. To volunteer their time, effort to help with that.
I mean, the reality check I'll give is like the labs are stretched thin, right? Like we're focusing on Plugfest activities and keeping up with that. I think we want to be contributors. We want to, increase that stuff, but like there needs to be, a way of making sure that we can sustain that. Right. And so that's the challenge, I think, on our side of like, we can bring a lot of expertise on that. We have the experience in developing those test plans, but we have to kind of point those expertise towards the activities that we're getting engagement from the industry on.
Yeah.
So you're not volunteering? Sorry, kidding. Yeah, okay. No, I think that's a fair point. I mean, ultimately, we're all in organizations that, need to be sustainable. But yeah, I think any other thoughts, Julie?
Yeah. Yeah, Abdel, maybe you can step up soon.
Well, yes, I think it was the second day that Ku volunteered to, it's too low, yes, I'm trying to read my notes. So Ku and I were gonna work on reports and outcomes for ORAN Alliance from things that we learned here today. And maybe you'd like to work on that too. You were gone that day, I think.
Yeah, I was out, sorry, yesterday.
Yeah, but we thought maybe, we could kind of look through all of the notes and see what we could feed back to ORAN Alliance from. So I'll take that action. I'll volunteer for that.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. So Julie will, basically just to summarize, basically, outcomes of this workshop will try to feed into ORAN, right? Yeah.
Abdel?
And I'm happy to work with you, Julie, on that, to feed it back to TIP. We could feed it back to the test and validation committee, and then we make sure that we kind of collaborating on that front. But I think on another level, I think the importance of test plans and test environments and all of these discussions that we had in the last 3 days, if we could come up with even a forum where all of those organizations that are developing test plans, even just to have an open discussion on strategies, roadmaps, what's the focus that we're thinking of. So I just can think of TIP, ORAN, Accord, ATIS, or any other it could be an open forum, just to maybe present the roadmaps or what's the thoughts of thinking behind the objective of the test cases and the test plans. So there's a way where we could exchange information.
Great question. Maybe something for our academic friends to think about, because then that's the most probably neutral ground wherein we can bring in. Maybe, I know there is a RITI-RAN conference coming up, organized by our dear friend Michele. I mean, that's a good start, but yeah, that's, any volunteers, maybe from our academic friends? No pressure. I think Abdel's suggestion of a forum where, I mean, there's like TIP, ORAN, Accord, ATIS. Is there actually an open forum where all of these groups can come together to, I guess, share?
It's the IOR.
The IORS.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Done. Okay. All right. Julie has committed to, that's another action on Julie. Julie, you're racking it up.
Yeah, in a sense, this is what we're doing here, right? Trying to bring together people from different groups and see what's going on. The RITI-RAN workshop sorry, very bad mistake, that Tian mentioned is something that we brought up from a more academic angle, trying to create a venue where people that are doing that are testing new methods for testing or developing new methods for testing can publish their results, which is something important in the academic world. So trying to provide an outcome for that is important, but I don't know if it's the kind of forum that you are describing. It's more like a side thing. I really think that this kind of environment is probably more conducive to the effort that you mentioned. So just to repeat Julie's question, is what can be done in terms of workforce development related to what Ian was mentioning on the, to be honest, I think the challenge is one step before getting to train engineers. If the question is how do we define in the short term testing methodologies which are robust, consistent, repeatable, and so on, it's probably something for now. While training, even if you start now, training and educating the workforce is something that you do for at least 2-3 years from now. This is at least my take. So I see them as sort of complementary.
Thank you. Abdel, you have?
Yes, just to build on the previous suggestion, I think if IORS can provide a forum, even if it's an online kind of meetings, maybe once a quarter or if even once every 6 months, and just invite these kind of bodies with academia, and each organization then can provide maybe a short kind of view on where they're heading towards. I think that would be very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually I should ask the group. We were thinking of having meetings every about 2 months so that we'd have several, like 4 or 5 meetings before we have the next EORS. So those would be just virtual where we can talk about what we're working on. It could be smaller breakouts too if people have individual things, see what people are interested in. So it'll be a little bit challenging with Europe and US and Asia. It always is, but we usually kind of take the early morning and then it works out for everybody else. Would that be interesting for folks? And we could invite folks. You could come if you want, not come if you don't want, but every couple months it shouldn't be a huge lift. And then we'll take the lead on kind of arranging different projects and what people want to work on. But I commit to that too. Actually, the State Department wants that. Especially for emerging economies, they want, okay, great. Okay, so several people have raised their hand. Perfect, okay.
So
Perfect.
Abdel, what are you signing up for?
Huh?
Oh, you're signing up to attend the virtual session or to?
Yeah, I was just wondering who might be interested in it every 2 months or so attending a virtual session. Lincoln, yeah, McKaylee, okay. Yeah, oh. Well, so these are more like working, what are the outcomes of these sessions every 2 months? So these are working sessions where we're trying to figure out what needs to be done in the short term. People are going off and doing things. ITS will do quite a bit of work ourselves with the State Department helping and OIA on the policy side so that then we can have projects ongoing and then report back at an in-person EORS in a year, basically. So that would be the purpose of it. And so we could just use the same email, I don't think we need people to sign up necessarily. We could use the same email list that we had for the technical sessions, and then folks that are interested then could attend those. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So along that line, sounds like maybe the right question, beyond there's gonna be a regular cadence thing is what are the, 4 or 5 individual tracks kind of during that virtual session, right? So maybe given the interest level of the coordination for the testing, maybe one of those tracks is test coordination across forums, right? So like taking a stab at that as kind of we know that's going to be a topic that's going to get hit on 4 times between now and next year or whatever.
Sorry, did you say test coordination across the different groups, right?
Yeah, test coordination across like, TIP, ORAN Alliance, Accord, as kind of a thing, and then maybe pick an assigned leader to that, which I'll raise my hand for that, Ian. But I can't say I'll raise my hand to do CRs across the board for like ORAN Alliance test plans,
So Lincoln, you're signing up to help the test coordination across the different groups, TIP, ORAN, and Accord. Yep, that's great.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Obviously, we will support you, Lincoln.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a lot of dragging input.
Yeah, ITS is willing to put forth a lot of work because this is our project, with the State Department funding going forward. So it's not just a symposium, it's the work in between. We want tangible outputs. And then it sounds like, especially the test vendors and TIP are also on board. So, it benefits us already. So we're willing to put time forward to that. And then anybody who wants to take on different aspects, we welcome the input and the help. So however much or however little you want to contribute, we're happy for that.
So I was going to make a comment exactly on those lines, but I think it's different than it sounded like the first call for collaboration was kind of grassroots things that individuals can do. But the topic you just talked about involves the roadmap and strategic plan of industry associations and standards bodies. And at some point, we need to articulate a vision of what issues need to be addressed there or how the entire ecosystem could benefit if the groups at best, aimed for some consistency when they were doing similar things, but maybe at a better level, not replicating, like deciding that, I don't know, M&O performance testing belongs in TIP and not in ORAN. I don't know. just an example, but so lots of good things to do, grassroots, bottom up, but at some point you're bringing big industry organizations together to suggest that their strategic roadmaps change, which is a different
Maybe our
activity.
policy folks could help with that.
And our M&O
connection.
friends. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just jumping ahead, like, I think one of the activities that I would see as like a kind of immediate next step, kind of grassroots thing, is taking kind of this expectation there's going to be something in a couple of months from now, pulling in updates from TIP and ORAN Alliance, and then getting like TIFG on board with that, right, as an example. So probably being able to have a good conversation at that, either like the face-to-face meeting or something like that, of like, here's what we're doing and trying to get that ball rolling and stuff like that. Just as a thing to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to build on that, within TIP, we're working on performance testing on end-to-end testings. And I'm hoping before Fuse, which is on 11th November this year, to publish these test cases and performance test procedures. So that hopefully would kind of help, working towards these kind of test plans that we were discussing earlier.
That's a really good point. So we have these virtual things, but we also have quite a few in-person things. And certain subsets of us will go, and I travel probably at least once a month. I'm going to Fuse. I just went to I-14Y. We have ORAN Alliance meetings every quarter. There's TIP meetings. So it could be a really good opportunity for us to have additional in-person, just, let's set aside a few hours during a conference.
Yes.
So that I think would be great.
And collaborating and aligning
Yes.
even our strategic objectives would be very helpful.
Yes, that would be great. So we can do some work and then have some of these checkpoints when we're all together in addition to the virtual. That would be fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, more a question than a proposal.
Okay.
First,
You're not volunteering?
I'm volunteering to ask the question.
Nice.
So, does your proposal concerning the lab coordination, does that include this subtopic we discussed in multiple groups about peer review, improvement of the test plans, checking how we make it more repeatable and consistent? Is that included, or should we look for a separate action on that?
So I was kind of envisioning this a little bit of like, we know we've got activities that are occurring in various organizations, right? Like, we know TIP's working on the end-to-end test plans. There's hopefully CRs that are incoming and to TIFG test plans from like Accord and stuff like that. I was thinking this was a little bit more of trying to kind of coordinate some of those efforts and then making sure we're not losing track of other things, right? So like, we talked a little bit during this event about like, could we add confidence interval documentation to test plans and stuff like that? And like making sure that we're kind of keeping a running list of the kind of to-do list on the test plan improvements and stuff like that, kind of cross industry at that level.
I think there's, to summarize what I'm hearing both of you saying, is there's efforts of what can we sort of tackle, maybe near term, midterm, long term. And then once we kind of figure this out, we need to have some division of labor between all the different groups like TIP and ORAN Alliance and ADIS, and somehow not having that. I mean, in addition to labs not duplicating things, we also need our standards groups to not duplicate things.
Well, I mean, like, so we need the standards groups to not do things, but also like, no one can probably go to TIFG just to pick on somebody and say, do X, right? Like, that will go over like a lead balloon, right? We need to actually, bring the contributors, bring the work, bring the ideas, and build it up that way. But to do that, we kind of have to kind of keep reminding folks of what's going on, and then do the bits and pieces of the contribution when we can.
And we could be kind of the glue where we're like, okay, well, this is already done in TIP. We don't need to do this in ORAN Alliance, or vice versa.
Yeah, and I think just to comment on that, I mean, obviously, ORAN is a consensus driven organization and contribution driven. And if a contribution is co-sourced by, I don't know, 4 MNOs and 12 vendors, I mean, it carries a lot of weight, right? And it's almost like in order to reverse that, you really have to have sustained objection. And so I think there's definitely, with the concerted effort, I think things can get better. And plus, at the end of the day, there's probably some technical issues left and right, but at the end of the day, it's pretty clear, at least in my mind, like, ORAN's focus is on the specifications, right? Driving the specifications as an SDO. Again, maybe the gray area is on the certification and badging on the end-to-end stuff and all that, and that we just have to work out. And maybe the solution there could just very well be a bit bottoms up in the sense of, we mentioned there's this void, there's this missing piece of a system level performance-driven, performance-based certification derived out of these MOU and ADIS MVP work, right? Like, if a group like TIP or a group like-minded folks can come together and create those, it's almost like that could help fill the void, and it could naturally come out of it. So a bit bottoms up, maybe the way to do it, other than, again, top-level coordination, trying to steer multiple, aircraft carriers is very, very hard, right? So anyway, it's just a comment.
That's good.
So thinking in the direction whether it would make sense to run end-to-end performance test specifications for the same setup, so same combination RUCU, DU in different labs with somehow different capabilities, and to compare it, the results, and take it as a starting point, a kind of practical starting point for our discussion on how to improve it and how to make it more consistent.
So are you volunteering to do a peer review of somebody else's lab, of their?
Yeah, or we also volunteer to run the tests, and someone else can do the peer review. Yeah.
I think that's something that we at Valor is also, we're willing to do that. And, I think we chatted, collaborating with I-14Y, with TIP to kind of run those tests in Valor.
And you already do have an MOU with the UK and Taiwan, is that correct? So if people already have MOUs set up with another lab, I was thinking that could be like a low-hanging fruit to do that peer review.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be another topic. So I was talking about improving the performance testing and this more end-to-end focus concerning Taiwan. So we work on the energy efficiency test plans, and then it's also a kind of peer review process.
So I think it would be great if you would be willing to kind of share what you're planning to do, and you could get even some input from the group, things to consider as you do these types of tests. And like, I would think it's like an example to other labs that we could learn, what works, what doesn't, that would be fantastic. I think that would be a really good low-hanging fruit. I mean, you could do whatever you had kind of planned on doing, and just get some input from the group as to, things you could think about, and then you could provide back input to us. So,
Yeah.
I see you nodding. So yes.
Yeah, Maggie looks like she's nodding.
Seems so.
And is Charles still here from the UK? Oh, right. Because I know they have agreements too.
Yeah, I think they are aligned, so we can confirm that.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, DT are working closely with us on the test cases, so we're happy to share that. And that could be the baseline for it, and maybe even get the TIFG, some of the conformance testings, or just to kind of fill in the loop here, and then we could do this kind of peer reviews.
Yeah, and so NTIA now has membership in TIP. It took us way too long to get, like 2 years, so we finally do. And we have membership in ORAN Alliance, and Larston's a voting member with some of us as backups on different things. So that we can kind of be the glue, because I know sometimes, if you're not a member of this or that, but we can get input and then bring it back to the groups, which would be something else we're committing to.
Good.
This is
Andres?
I'm happy already.
All right.
Okay, so goal achieved.
I'm happy.
Let's leave while we're ahead. No, I'm kidding.
Talking about low-hanging fruits, I think a lot of OTICs are setting up the full plug fest now. And in any case, a lot of results will be shared. But there might be more information available, and it could be an approach to set up a discussion on some specific points and more talk about learnings, just as an idea. So I'm not so sure how that could work, but the good thing is there are a lot of things planned for October, and a lot of tests will run. And why don't we take that for more than just do the necessary ORAN reporting?
Yeah, I would almost like to just first catalog some of these collaborations that are happening to just even understand everything that's happening and what the results. I mean, even just that I think would be a good first step, just to know what's happening and what the timelines, you know, the anticipated timelines are. That would be fantastic.
So
I don't know if anybody has any, like, you know, with some of the other standard stuff, we've had some sort of like a website where people can list, I mean, is there any sort of privacy issues or, you know, are all these things you'd be happy sharing with the group? You know, we could just have membership for the group where they could have, you know, you could list things up there.
So, I mean, ORAN has a wiki, right? Which is essentially open to all ORAN
I don't
members.
want to associate it with just ORAN, because some people may not be associated with ORAN. We also have TIP, we have
Correct,
added,
yeah.
so I'd like some sort of way, like I'm picturing like a IORS wiki or.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think that would be great.
Something like that, you know, where we can freely add information and people could, you know, kind of like we did for this thing where you could say, yeah, I'm happy sharing and say that it's fine.
Kind of a collaboration, online collaboration workspace. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, it could be Atlassian, it could be, there's different
Yeah,
options.
yeah, I think that would be great. Too bad Margaret's not still here.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up one point that I saw as well in the, I mean, it brought up quite a bit, which is kind of improving accreditation of labs or something along those lines. Like, I think there is identified, let's call it priority within TIFG to kind of look into OTIC accreditations, potentially helping, you know, again, you know, aiding towards potentially an ISO program within ORAN. I don't know if there's some volunteers to kind of drive that, because I think we kind of, you know, just opening it up, bringing it up to the team.
And do we
I'm
feel
looking
like
at Doug.
longer term, or is that like, I'm wondering if it's a near term, midterm, or longer term?
I mean, it's literally, I mean, I would say it's a near-term thing in the sense of okay, it was identified as a priority item in TIFG, multiple face-to-face on, you know, is there a way that we can do some form of OTIC accreditation? It was discussed during our breakouts on today being an OTIC is fairly, the bar is fairly low. So is there a way to kind of improve that? Yeah, Doug?
So more than the peer review.
Peer review could be one of the ways to get to a much more robust network of OTIC labs, right? Yeah, sorry,
Oh, right.
Doug, yeah.
Watching the discussions that sort of began with the idea of GSMA, NISAS doing some of the security testing, there seems to be a reasonable amount of unfamiliarity with the attributes of formalized test programs. So one of the things that we had volunteered is actually to have the Director of Conformity Assessment at NIST give a talk at an ORAN Alliance meeting. I offered this to Scott Paretsky. He was suggesting doing it at a joint TFIG Working Group 11 meeting, or, you know, it could be anywhere. And you know that on the backside, I've been sending you various quality manuals from test programs that NIST run with varying degrees of level of formality in them as examples, just to understand the kinds of things that you have to document and make decisions on, frankly. So I guess I'm lightly helping in sort of round up ways on that. And then after a description of what it really means to be in a formalized conformity assessment program, then we can decide how to carry the.
Yeah,
the
we can
script.
create the work item out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug, for volunteering to drive the work item along the lines. That's what I heard.
Nobody comes to the mic. Nobody's going to come up again.
Okay. All right. Lincoln, you're not itching to go up the mic again? No?
Yeah, nobody's coming up again. Nobody, yeah.
You took your action? Okay. Irfan, it looks like you want to stand up, no? What can open source do for, to help us with the issues we've identified? Okay, we'll talk about it. Maybe it's over some beers.
So I know we don't have a, the policy group here, but there's something what I would like to offer to the policy side. At Fuse, we do have a policy roundtable, quite extensive one. And I was thinking that if you could summarize the policy summary, and we could actually have a follow-up at Fuse, because many of the policy track people will be at face-to-face at Fuse, and even at a more extended capacity. So we would be more than willing to adopt the agenda accordingly, what the findings of this group have been, and if we could give them a pre-work, and we could actually potentially have a follow-up at Fuse. So that could be a step that we could work on.
That's a good idea.
Maybe next week.
Yeah, because we could summarize what we've done, summarize some of the things we're thinking of doing. I mean,
Exactly.
we'd have to say draft on it. Draft, we're still.
Yeah, but we could
forming
build
it,
upon this
Right,
this
and then
conference.
We could give an ask to the policy folks, are there any things you could help us with? Like,
Yeah.
especially, these different groups, getting them to work together and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or, maybe there's some funding involved to help some of it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just to Lincoln's point about being so overbooked, but if there's more funding, maybe that's helpful.
Yeah.
Hire more people to help. Did you have others on your list? Sorry, Jeremy told me to come up here. I'm not trying to take over your.
Yeah, so maybe just to remind people of what ChatGPT told us, system integration, OTIC certificates and badges, I think we touched a bit on that, workforce development, security, test procedures. I think, yeah, looks like we covered quite a bit. Any other topics that people want to volunteer on? Looks like folks are ready to hit the bar.
So I think, Julie, you're volunteering for the follow-up of this general follow-up, maybe.
Yes.
Is a big one. So
Yes.
let us know if we can help in any way and be of assistance.
Yeah, actually, I have that you, Abdel, Ku, and Ian would be willing to kind of help with some of the summaries, correct?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
I took that as that'd be fantastic. I did note data. That's a big one, though. Data is not available, and how can we get real world data? I don't even know if we want to try to tackle that one, but I know that's constantly coming up. That was one of my highlights that I highlighted to the policy group. Yeah, I was just looking at my highlights. But yeah, that might be a longer term one. Yeah. But you do need some sort of neutral body, and you need, how to have the trust of the M&Os and to trust that you're scrubbing it. And so that are you volunteering for data? Take on all of data for AIML?
I have no data. But one of the things I was about to say is, one of the things in other realms that have been useful to at least inspire data sharing or at least get some commonality there, is to describe the metadata that goes with a data set, right? What does it mean to describe, you know, I don't know, the traffic scenarios that you want to test? I could provide some examples of that in other technology realms, but it's been useful so that if anyone has data to contribute, that it's sort of is accompanied by, you know, standardized metadata so that other people know how to use it. Or sometimes if it's synthetically generated data, you still have a common set of metadata that lets you understand the traffic.
Ian, have you worked with MNOs to try to get real data for test vendors?
So, I guess as kind of more of from a bilateral, you know, Viavi and an MNO, you know, as we're supporting them, of course, you know, we get some access to that data, but it's usually, of course, very tied to the very specific work that's being done. I mean, the availability of truly open data sets that can be used for AI/ML training in this space has always been, it's a big issue, has been talked about since, I don't know, years. And really the challenge here is I mean, you know, we all know the challenges, right? I mean, the workaround has always been synthetic data generation is one workaround, and Doug mentioned using metadata. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's, you know, until something really big changes. I mean, you know, of course, there's, you know, academic groups have always been very helpful in actually helping just generate a lot of this data as well. There's now a lot of open data sets that are coming out of it, but yeah, something that's actually truly, you know, related to, let's call it real world deployments of large scale MNOs. It's very, very hard.
Okay. Well, I think we're standing between people and they're happy.
Yes. Do you want us to summarize, at least summarize the summary?
Sure, go ahead. I have, but go ahead, yes.
So at least what I took down is Julie has volunteered to help, you know, take the outcomes of this workshop and feed this into ORAN. I guess with the help of several folks as well. Also, Abdel volunteered to help the same thing to push these into TIP. So that's two ways. There's a discussion on this, a periodic meeting. Also, NTIA is volunteering to do that every 2 months, working sessions. And then there's several topics. Lincoln has volunteered to do some test coordination across the different groups, TIP, ORAN, Accord. And then TIP has volunteered to support that, of course. And ITS is also going to do that. And then the Andreas, I14Y, has volunteered to be able to run these tests with some, let's call it common, I don't want to say blueprints, but common deployment models. Some people use that term. And, you know, Valor, Ian, I also volunteered to help with that. And I think ITRI as well, and potentially Sonic, but they weren't here, but I'm sure. So that gives you Asia, you know, UK, Germany, United States. It's pretty good coverage. They all happen to have some tie-ins as well with both ORAN and TIP. So it's a good place to start improving the rigor, especially in these system level test plans that we're talking about. So I think those are the ones. Oh wait, okay. There's
To publish.
Yes, TIP has agreed to publish their first version of performance test plans before Fuse, November 11. And that's, you know, in conjunction with some major operators helping create those. So that's got some good backing. And on OTIC accreditation, Doug has volunteered to complete it for the ORAN Alliance. No, I'm kidding. No, Doug has volunteered to invite the Director of Conformity from NTIA to present to both TIFG and Workgroup 11, at least gain, let's call it increase the understanding within ORAN on what it takes to create such a program for the scope of accreditation. And then outcome of that will be TIFG work item.
I also,
Sorry. And all the examples, Doug has already been doing that, really, kind of sending. Yeah. Perfect. Yes, and-
I also volunteered ITS to create an IORS wiki.
Oh,
And
yes.
one of the things I'd like to have on there is an inventory of lab collaborations that are already going on or planned.
Perfect. So those are the ones that I captured.
Oh, and if time allows, since I'm going to be at Fuse, Ollie asked if I could summarize the findings, or you could summarize the findings too for EORS.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, we volunteered for that, yep. So we need to go, I need to get busy. I have a lot of work now.
Okay. Well, I think our job is done. Back to Jeremy.
Yeah, so well, actually, before Jeremy comes up, so I just wanted to thank everybody again for coming and staying till the 11th hour here. I think it was a very productive session. I got exactly, what I wanted out of it, to come up with these action items and have very concrete next steps. I also, really enjoyed having the policy folks. Several people told me it was really nice. Some people even went sometimes to the policy, sometimes to the technical. And then we're going to be putting together a survey and hopefully people can give us feedback. We really do want honest feedback. We don't want just all whitewashing. It was great. We really want, concrete, what you'd like to have happen next, what you'd like to see in the interim. We'd really like to have that feedback. So thank you. And thanks to Jeremy for an amazing job as an MC.
All right, you kicked off my thank yous. You took care of a few of them.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't going to
Sorry
pick
about that.
myself. Thank you for that. That wasn't on my list. But thank you to our EORS leadership from ITS and OIA from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We had Jay Ray, Julie Cubb, Kate Dimsdale, Margaret Pinson, Brian Larkin, Corey Shermer, and all the NTI and other folks who worked behind the scenes. Can we give them a big hand of applause? I always want to point out the unsung heroes at these events, that this doesn't just happen. There are people working behind the scenes that you don't see every day and before you got here, and they'll be here a little after you leave. So thank you to our event hosts here in Golden. Kathy and Anna Maria, where are you? All right. I asked them to come in here, but they're hiding. They probably knew why. But, and also Chris and your awesome AV team, all the stage and things moving around and how it looks on the camera and to the virtual audience. I just want to thank you for all of your hard work and helping do the hurdles with us as we experienced them mostly on the first day. But thank you to the IT folks. As Julie mentioned, we do want your feedback. As I mentioned before, I think yesterday, tell me anything that you liked about it now. That's great. Then you could write everything that you didn't like in an email and then send it when you get home. But I would definitely, there's Kate Dimsdale. So we did say thanks to Kate and the OIA team. The policy folks are, and Anna Maria, just say thanks to Kathy for us. All right, all right. But back to the feedback. So Julie mentioned you can always email us at IORS@nti.gov with any feedback or suggestions or to add anything else to the conversation. We are going to work on getting a more of a written feedback to everybody, so you can just put things in a form or a free form, just write out what you would like. But you can always do that via email. Let's see. Okay, and then also I will note one more time the information we shared on our website, its.ntia.gov. If you go to our website, you can go to the research tab and go down to 5G. We have information about our current and previous work, including the 2022-2023 5G Challenge, the RIC Forum, and this event, EORS. Let's see, anything else? Anything else? Last calls. Okay. Well, thank you all. I just want to mention one more time, you've attended the first ever International Open RAN Symposium, and we at NTI are thrilled with the high level of attendance and turnout, the robust discussions, and the commitment here by almost everyone to participate, engage, lend your knowledge and expertise to this community effort to advance Open RAN. It is definitely a community effort. Let's not forget our policy track colleagues over there, and some of them are in this room who are also committed to this to effort. And so we just appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time. And more information on that will be coming hopefully soon. So thank you all very much. Have a safe trip home, safe travels, everybody, and have a great evening.